All right. Good evening, everyone. My name is Jim Ostrowski, and I work in Eagle's Environmental Support Division. I'll be the moderator for tonight. I welcome you to our Michigan Healthy Climate Workgroup recommendations listening session. This is the second session of two. Our first one was yesterday morning. So we had a good session that time, and I think it's already posted out on YouTube. So if any of you want to see that session, you can. The recording is out there. I'm just going to go over a couple housekeeping logistical issues, and then we'll get her underway. First of all, at this time, all the lines are muted. And just to let you know, we are recording this event like we do all our public meetings, and then we post it on our YouTube channel in the next couple days. I'll explain later how we'll unmute the mics to let you make your comments, but I'll explain that in a little bit. First of all, what we're going to do is have a presentation by James Cliff. So I'm going to introduce James. Go ahead and come on and take it away.
Thank you very much, Jim. Appreciate it. Again, my name is James Cliff. I am the deputy director, one of the deputy directors of the Michigan Department of Environment, Great Lakes, and Energy. And really appreciate folks joining us tonight. My presentation that Kimber is about to pull up is just going to basically give you an outline of kind of where we are in the process and the importance of kind of public input, at this point. The Michigan Council on Climate Solutions was created. You can go to the next slide, Kimber. Was created by Governor Whitmer through executive order and executive directive. And basically, the council is I believe it's 16, 18 members with including 5 state department directors. That's basically helping advise Eagle on the preparation of the My Healthy Climate Plan. And the My Healthy Climate Plan was basically to kind of identify those opportunities to implement emission reduction strategies to get us to kind of net zero carbon by 2050 with interim goals in 2025 and 2030, and really look very carefully at how it could impact kind of different communities across the state and make sure that we try to minimize any of those potential impacts, having people disproportionately impacted by the changes, both by the changing climate and the kind of solutions to it, and make sure that we're doing it in a way that kind of maximizes the public health benefits and maximizes potential economic development opportunities in Michigan. Next slide. This is kind of how we've kind of formed the structure around the council. You can see below the council, we have 5 work groups. Those are kind of the main areas where we're seeing kind of emissions today and where we like to see these reductions come from. So energy production, buildings and housing, transportation, natural working lands, and energy intensive industries. Each of those work groups has met over the last 6 or 8 months to create kind of recommendations for the councils to discuss. They had anywhere from 10 to 15 meetings. Some of them had over 100 people participating in their work group process. All of those recommendations now have been forwarded onto the council itself and can be found on the website for the Council on Climate Solutions. We've also got some kind of advisors. You see the little boxes off to the side, the Michigan Advisory Council on Environmental Justice and the Climate Brain Trust, kind of looking at some of those equity issues, and the Council on Future Mobility and Electrification, given the importance of the automotive sector to Michigan's economy, both historically and going forward. So the council is kind of discussing those recommendations at this point. And this is why we're looking for more public input on those recommendations. Do they make sense? Should they be either kind of revised or should they be set aside for now? Or are there other recommendations that we should be adding to the list for the council to discuss? Once all those have been discussed, it will be Eagle's job to kind of put it together in a draft plan. We hope to have that draft plan ready by mid-January. The council will again discuss that draft plan, and then it will go out for public comment. And our task is to deliver a finalized plan to Governor Whitmer by mid-March. Next slide. In each of the recommendation areas, each of the work groups, they were tasked for telling us, hey, what's the top 5 kind of areas that you think, recommendation areas that we should be looking at, both looking at that potential to reduce emissions, but doing it in an equitable manner, in a manner that makes kind of the most fiscal sense. And in each one, though, we wanted to ask them, hey, what are going to be those barriers? What might get in our way of implementing? Whenever you need to change something that's been status quo, something's been status quo, especially for a number of years, change is never easy. So what do we see as those kind of major roadblocks, and how might we get around them? The governor asked us to really focus on, hey, what are those things we need to do first? What do we need to do in the next 5 or 10 years if we're going to achieve those 2050 goals? And wants us to kind of make sure that we get down to not only writing a plan, but getting down to serious work and achieving some of the goals of that plan. Next slide. This is kind of a very shorthand version of all the recommendations you're seeing up on the screen now, a very shorthand. So I really recommend that people go and kind of read, especially areas you're interested, read the documents that are on the council website, which gives a little bit more flavor and context to each of these recommendations. But this is helpful for some people to kind of see them all in front of them, 28 altogether. I mentioned the 5 work groups. We actually internally at Eagle created a 6th work group on the circular economy and food waste, kind of looking at that issue of kind of things that are going into the landfill now, and how those might be diverted, and what's the impact of that on climate kind of going forward. But these are the recommendations that the council is currently kind of reviewing and trying to pick out those ones that are one of the key recommendations, which ones should go first as Michigan embarks on this journey. And of course, we're not just starting today. Michigan's already been embarking on this journey. We have a number of programs today to cite renewable energies, improve energy efficiency in state buildings, working with local units of government across the state who have really been moving forward very quickly, have set goals for themselves and are in the process of trying to implement those goals. How do we share those best practices that we see out of what we're calling our catalyst communities? So again, we know that we're just one piece of the larger puzzle. This is not something that's going to be solved by state government alone. This is something that's going to take collective effort of state government, businesses, individuals, nonprofits, federal government, international. This is a big problem, but we want to make sure that we're doing our part. Next slide. This just kind of gives you a little picture of, kind of those diverse resources that are going to be necessary to kind of bring to the table. You look at our emissions now, where for decades, electricity production was our #1 source of carbon emissions, mainly from old coal-fired power plants. But we're getting to a point where more and more of those are closing. And I think now we have announcements to close all the plants but one by the year 2028 in Michigan. So we've seen transportation kind of edge it out on total carbon emissions. So that's where you hear a lot of people talking about electric vehicles and their part of the puzzle in the future, looking at mass transit, other transportation options, so that people don't even have to get into a vehicle at all, to try to reduce the emissions from that sector. The carbon intensive industries, especially things that you think about as being kind of some of the building blocks of our economy in the past, the steel industry, cement, a lot of kind of energy intensive industries that are going to have to figure out how to do things in a new way going forward. And then agricultural, commercial and residential sector, lots of different parts. And again, so it's going to take a lot of collective effort from a lot of people to get to where we want to go. So, but we're committed to that plan. The governor is committed to that plan, and we're looking forward to input on the recommendations themselves. Next slide. Very important in our kind of our evaluation in each of the recommendations, we asked the work group to really look at the justice and equity issues that might arise from those recommendations. How might these changes have detrimental effects on certain either kind of geographic locations or certain sectors? Are there certain jobs that we expect that those areas are going to be reduced in the future? And therefore, are we looking at retraining those people or retraining kind of new people to work in sectors that we expect to grow in the future if we implement everything that's in the climate plan? So we're trying to do this in a manner that is least disruptive as far as potentially the negative effects of people potentially losing their job, and provide the most benefit to maybe those communities that have been hardest hit from those practices in the past. Next slide. Again, this is just kind of one opportunity to kind of provide us input on the plan. What you see here is emails, and we'll put these in the chat that kind of give you an idea of where if you've got an interest in one of these specific areas, go right to that email and kind of send us your thoughts. It just helps us kind of collect the number of comments that we're getting at this point. The one at the top is kind of just a general comment section, but we're willing to kind of take written submissions through those emails. But again, we're looking forward to your oral presentations today. So thank you very much. And I'm going to turn it back over to Jim and Kimber to kind of take us through tonight's list of presenters.
All right, thanks, James. I tried to put in the chat the email addresses, so hopefully you all got that. And I'm going to bring up my slides back again. All right, so yeah, I put there in the chat. I also put the website for where the recommendations are housed, so if you want to check those out. Yeah, so now we're going to get into the actual reason why we're here is to listen to you and your comments. Kimber Franz is here to help me out tonight. She's going to help announce who's going to be commenting, and keep an eye on the chat because she will put in there who's going to be up next. The way we're going to do this is when you registered, you had the opportunity to identify whether or not you wanted to make a comment tonight. And if you selected yes, we have your name here. And what we're going to do is start going through all those names. And once we get through those names, then we'll open it up to anybody else that'd like to make a comment. And to do that, you'll just click the raise hand icon. If you're on the phone, and I'm just checking to see if we have anybody on the phone tonight, phone only, it doesn't look like it. But if we do have somebody on the phone, to hit #2. And by the way, we do have 61 people on at this point listening in. And yeah, so that's pretty much it. When we call your name, what we'd like you to do is repeat your name for us and let us know any affiliation that you're with, association or group that you represent, and then you can do your comment. We're going to limit comments to 3 minutes. We've got a lot of people who said they wanted to comment tonight. So in order to be as efficient as possible, please limit your comments to 3 minutes. And I've got my phone here. I'm going to help keep track of that time. I will let you know when you have 1 minute left. And so at that point, start to wrap up. And when you hit 3 minutes, I'll let you know. And yeah, please just wrap it up so you can let the next person make their comment. Again, if you have really extensive comments that you'd like to make beyond tonight, you can always email us. And in the chat there's the work groups, different work groups you can email. And that's another great way to get your comment in. So with that, I am going to start us off. So what I'm going to do is call it the first person. And if you look in the chat for tonight, you'll see who's all on deck. So you'll know if you're coming up. All right. So Kimber, I guess, can you tell me who the first person is?
Sure. First is Benterrell, Tirrell.
Yep, I see Ben, you're here tonight. So I'm going to allow you to unmute yourself and you can go ahead and make your comments to us.
Well, good evening. My name is Benterrell. I represent Michigan Farm Bureau. I'll make a very brief comment. I've been a part of the Natural and Working Lands work group, and so I just want to give some credit to the chairs of that work group. I think we've had some great dialogue. Just one sort of brief and general comment about the Natural and Working Lands. recommendations, and I think it applies to some of the other recommendations as well, is just that I think that, as we take a step back and look at some of these, that I think it's really important to keep in mind looking at these things from systems perspective, and just in terms of those natural working lands recommendations, I think there are some verbiage, mostly in the written narrative on those recommendations, that talks about specifically plant-based diets or monoculture agriculture, things like that, and I don't know that those are helpful for illustrative purposes, or frankly, even all that accurate. I think we really need to look at the diversity of systems that we have out there, and trying to work within those systems, and looking at the systems as a whole in terms of their climate impact. So I guess that would be my comment, and again, appreciate the time to make that tonight.
All right, thanks for your comment tonight. Next up.
Next is Jesse Deer in Water.
All right, looking for Jesse. And I do not see anybody in attendance tonight under that name. If you're logging in under another name, just go ahead and raise your hand later on, and we'll come back to you. Who's up next?
Next is Bo Torres.
Okay, I see Bo. So Bo, you can go ahead and unmute your line.
Yes, good afternoon. Calling in from Grand Rapids, Michigan, working for Grand Rapids Climate Action alongside a lot of different groups here with the C4, which is also with the city, really looking at ways that we can engage with federal funding that's coming in electrification of roadways, ways that we can really increase the way that we are going to be utilizing our different areas, Detroit, Lansing, Grand Rapids, as key points of transit, how those areas can best be utilized as marquee destinations to utilize electrification, charging ports, real clean infrastructure that can be used for 20, 30, 40 years down the line. We could be a real catalyst for those conversions. We could be a test case for a lot of different automobiles, what we're seeing that's happening at the University of Michigan, what we're seeing that's been happening at Michigan State University, utilizing those specific funds to really create pathways that are going to be creative, that are going to be innovative for automation. Really looking at ways that we can include public transit and public transportation in those same pathways to electrification, to be used for trains, diverse areas for high-speed busing routes, which have been spoken about in different master plans for the state of Michigan. So I just wanted to bring that to the attention of the group today and really look at that as transit and transportation and electrification are all already a part of this master plan.
All right, thanks for your comment. Appreciate that. I'm gonna go back. I did see Jesse Deer and Water. You did come back in. So if you want to make your comment, I just I allowed you to mute yourself. So you can go ahead and go.
Yes, sorry, I was actually on another meeting and kind of forgot a little bit. All right. There's a lot of different things going on as far as climate solutions and approaches towards a more just and fair future that we can all survive and thrive in safely. One of the things I would like to bring attention to today is nuclear energy and Fermi 2. Though nuclear energy is claimed to have less carbon, the health effects from radionuclides and the impacts from reactors and waste and mining and processing communities are different than those related to carbon. They are related to radionuclides and different poisons in the land. And so nuclear cannot really be considered clean on a truly human level at our core if it's poisoning people around in different areas. The Physicians for Responsible Health recently did a study about the Fermi 2 nuclear reactor and the amount of cancer and the growth since it went online, they say that Monroe County and the surrounding areas had lower levels of cancer below the national average, actually well below the national average, before Fermi 2 went online. And from the time it fired up until now, that average has grown plus 35% the national average. I believe radiation.org is where they have their study at. And they also have done other studies at other sites around the country, reactors and reactor communities. And it shows the same thing. And so what we're kind of asking and what we would like you guys to take into consideration is that there are alternative energy solutions out there. It has been proven in different places in different ways, and I'm hearing that it's being proven here locally in Michigan and even southeastern Michigan that a community can survive and thrive with their energy system, potentially not relying on nuclear energy. And so yeah, sorry, I don't have my comments and stuff in front of me because I just jumped from our meeting that we have bi-weekly.
You got about 1 minute left.
Oh yeah, yeah. All right. So 1 minute. Am I going to be able to submit some documents too?
You bet. In the chat, there's the email address you can send it to.
All right. Yeah. I'm gonna defer to that for a good amount of my stuff. The only thing I just like to say is that there's a historical legacy of violence and impacts on people of color and indigenous communities here in America that are involved with the uranium extraction process and nuclear energy and bombing. And we just need to find a way forward, not without nuclear power. You know, there's many pathways being drawn out, and I believe that there are ways that Michigan can move forward protecting our Great Lakes from not only just protecting our Great Lakes from radioactive waste. Thank you. I'll submit the documents.
All right. Thank you. All right. Next up, Kimber.
Next up is Amy Rogie, Rogghe.
Yep, I see Amy, and Amy, you can go ahead and unmute yourself and make your comment.
Okay, thank you. My name is Amy Rogie. I'm part of a few different climate groups here tonight representing the Michigan Electric Vehicle Alliance. I'm one of the co-founders. I'm also a member of Michigan Clinicians for Climate Action, which is a large climate group that's all medical providers in the state of Michigan. So I really wanted to focus my comments on 3 different aspects related to the transportation and mobility work group. As you noted, transportation that sector is the largest contributor to CO2 emissions in the state of Michigan. So I really think a strong focus on this sector is really important. And when you extrapolate that piece of the pie out, passenger and light duty vehicles actually contribute 58% of that. So if you want to look at, making the biggest difference, you got to target the biggest contributors. So for the Michigan Electric Vehicle Alliance, we really want to focus on those passenger and light duty vehicles. The 5 comments or the suggestions that the Mobility and Transportation Work Group have put forward are amazing. We totally support them. We would like to see some kind of verbiage or plan in place for educating the public in Michigan, specifically to range anxiety. And I know Governor Whitmer has addressed this in some of her talks, but that's something that we'd really like to see included as part of kind of the #1 recommendation that they made, that Michigan should make an electrification plan. We'd like to see education there regarding the public on range anxiety. And regarding range anxiety, we'd like to see something about the different kinds of charging stations, the different levels, because I think people get confused very easily. And there's a whole slew of different charging levels just within level 2. So
Yeah, 1 minute.
Okay, thanks. So we'd really like to see something as far as highlighting the importance of installing those higher level 2 charging stations, and even more importantly, the level 3, especially now that Tesla no longer has their software as proprietary anymore. We can all use it. We'd like to really highlight the importance of installing the higher level 2 charging stations and then the level 3 charging stations. And that's all I got. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Okay, next up.
Kay Chase.
All right, Kay, go ahead.
Hello, Kate Chase here. I am representing only myself in these comments. I represent a large demographic group in Michigan. In that I am an older resident of Michigan, and that's a demographic group which is going to continue to expand and become a larger portion of our population. So I am really interested in, I have particular personal interest in the transportation aspects of this, because I think, as Amy just said, it's the sector that we really, really need to work on, because it is such a huge contributor to our problem right now. Also, I get kind of following on what Amy has just talked about too, the electric vehicles. I was glad to see that the transportation work group, while they concentrated a lot on electric vehicles and clean fuels and things like that, things that we certainly do need, I hope we're not dazzled by that to the extent that we forget about some of the forms of transportation that we have right now that have great promise, and that we can ramp up our public transportation system. For instance, I was glad to see that the transportation work group in their list of priority projects do specifically call for expanding access to convenient zero emission public transit. That's something that we can do. I think we can do quickly, and it would have a huge impact. I'm a little disappointed that intercity passenger trains, which I am interested in because I use them a lot. Trains are only mentioned twice in this entire document. The state has made an investment in our passenger trains, and we have a lot of freight activity in our state as well. And that seems to me an investment that we could realize some more gain on. I think a lot of our state is not really tuned into the fact that we have intercity passenger rail, and it could become a much more important part of our system. And we certainly have a potential to connect more of our state with more frequent and better train service. And I would really like to see that
It's 3 minutes, ma'am.
emphasized a little more in the plan. I want to commend everybody that's worked on this. It's a lot of work and a document that's got a lot of value. And I'm just looking forward to seeing these recommendations become action items. Thanks a lot for listening to me.
Thank you. Okay, we're next up. Who do we got, Kimber?
We have Joe Ross, ROSS.
I am not seeing a Joe Ross in attendance tonight.
Next after Joe is Diana Corpolango.
Okay, got Diana. So Diana, you can go ahead and unmute and make your comment now.
Oh, thank you so much. I joined a little late, so I missed the introduction, and if there's a new plan out there. That's great. I just wanted to voice my support for a carbon based energy waste reduction program and make sure that we are looking at existing homes being able to electrify and transition away from the use of fossil fuels. And I want to make sure that the committee knows that there's a pretty big group of millennials and also some baby boomers out there right now that are really interested in doing what they can to reduce their carbon footprints and their fossil fuel use at home. So we do need to change the energy waste reduction laws to make sure that customers right now that have natural gas, that when they electrify their homes, because they have paid into EWR, that they're going to be able to get incentives for efficient electric technologies, whether that be heat pumps for space heating of the geothermal or air source variety, as well as heat pump water heaters, because they're extremely beneficial to not only our health and safety at home, but our fossil fuel reduction. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you, Diana. Next up.
Next up is Elizabeth Delbono. It's Delbuono.
All right, got her. So Elizabeth, go ahead.
Hi, my name is Elizabeth Delbono. I go by Lisa, and I'm a recently retired doctor, and I'm executive director of Michigan Clinicians for Climate Action, which Amy mentioned earlier. We're a coalition of health professionals from across the state working to educate our peers, public, and policymakers about the health impacts of the climate crisis. First and foremost, I want to thank you guys and applaud you for grounding your work in human health, because health is the face of the climate crisis. As you well know, it is affecting each of us today right here in Michigan, and those who live closest to fossil fuel use and production sites have suffered health impacts for decades. The climate crisis acts as a threat multiplier, often taking manageable medical conditions and turning them into emergencies. Think of an elderly diabetic patient in inner city Detroit who presents to our ER on a hot summer night in kidney failure or heart failure. The extreme heat events are becoming more common, and those living in urban areas which do not cool down at night find it really hard to tolerate. Any first responder will tell you an extreme weather event, whether it be heat, flooding, electric outages due to storms, are tipping points for people who were previously stable. Fortunately, a lot of what we do, a lot of what you suggested is also good for our health. So I think the most critical step is rapidly transitioning away from fossil fuels, including natural gas, and improving electric energy efficiency and electrifying our transportation and building sectors. These measures would improve both outdoor but indoor air quality as well, and it would save lives and healthcare dollars. According to a study from Duke University, if we were to reduce emissions on par with the IPCC goals in Michigan alone over the next 50 years, we would save 235,000 lives. We would avoid 32,000 hospitalizations, 37,000 ER visits due to asthma, 100,000 cases of dementia. That's dementia. 15 billion lost workdays and 19 trillion healthcare dollars here in the US because of improved air quality. So my suggestions are go for the 100% zero carbon electricity standard by 2035, make it easy for people to build solar, encourage our utilities to transition off of natural gas because that's the under-recognized source of indoor air pollution, and require our utilities to do health impact studies. So thank you so much for allowing me to talk today, and I applaud each of you for your commitment to health and well-being of the people that you're serving. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, who's next?
Next is Ellis Ball, B-O-A-L.
Not seeing Ellis in attendance today.
Then Jack Schroeder.
I don't see a Jack either.
Okay, then Jacob Harold, Herald.
I see Jacob. Jacob, you can go ahead.
Hey guys, I'm Jacob Harold. Just representing myself. I'm a huge advocate for public transit and biking and walking, and this is specifically for the transportation guys. I was really glad to see. I signed up for a comment because I wasn't as optimistic as what the PDF they released about a month ago or 2 months ago. I was glad to see that most of the things on there, while they do mention EVs, also most of them talk about alternative forms other than personal vehicles, and also mentioning MDOT project trying to reduce vehicle miles traveled and lanes and things like that. So I'm really happy about this. My only concern was trying to get that culture change at MDOT, because right now we have a lot of projects that are expanding lane miles. And there's a couple projects that are in the pipeline that are good, such as the Ferndale Woodward repave, which is great. And once that goes, I think kind of get the ball moving, especially towards 375 Boulevard. So just pass on good vibes to you guys, and thanks for your time.
All right, thanks, Jacob. Who's next, Kimber?
Next up is Catherine Savoy.
Don't see Catherine in attendance tonight.
Then Karen O'Brien, it's Kerrin.
Yep, I see Karen. So Karen, go ahead.
Hi, thanks for the opportunity to speak with you today. I really appreciate the work of the council. Was very happy to see late inclusion of priorities around materials. The stuff that we, the products of our lives really embody a lot of energy. And I think we need to be very thoughtful about how we produce, consume, and dispose of, or hopefully recycle these items. So I'm really happy to see that was included. I would like to think about producer responsibility and helping our manufacturers and our brand owners kind of transition to taking more responsibility for the life cycle of the products that they produce. I also hope that there's consideration for items that didn't make it to the list. I think this problem is quite a huge problem, and we're all going to have to contribute to the solutions. So I hope there's ample time put toward helping the state, helping communities, individuals, businesses step up to take on the solutions that come from within their own organizations and their own households. Appreciate your work, and that's all I've got to say.
All right, thanks, Karen. Next up.
Next up is Karen White, WIGHT.
There is no Karen in attendance.
Okay, then Missy Stultz, STULTS.
Do not see Missy here today either.
Okay, then we have Renee Wallace.
I see Renee. So Renee, you can go to unmute and make your comment.
Good day, everyone, and thanks for the opportunity to be here and to share this evening. I am Renee Wallace, and I'm representing Food Plus Detroit, Doers Edge, myself, as well as I'm a part of a group of nonprofits, Make Food Not Waste, Food Rescue US Detroit, and others, stakeholders who are putting forth some recommendations around food waste, food loss, and waste reduction strategies. We developed a series of 10 key strategies based on best practices in the United States to help contribute toward the healthy climate in Michigan. We submitted those strategies, and they are balanced across areas of source reduction, rescue and recycling methods, emphasis on actions that will help reduce food loss and food waste, and deliver significant savings as it relates to reducing greenhouse gas emissions and a positive net economic return. Examples of those strategies that we submitted, the first being a cross-sectional strategy, creating an environment that's needed to reduce food waste through diversion from landfills in operations such as composting. Policy strategies that we implemented are suggesting are supporting the adoption of a model compost procurement policy that can be adopted by municipalities, by organizations, addressing the date labels to reduce the amount of foods that get thrown away, providing additional food donation liability protection, again, to prevent foods from being thrown away, increasing food loss strategies in schools, and incentive programs and educational campaigns, including education of food service professionals in food waste reduction, consumer education and behavior change, addressing the food loss on farms, and providing state credits beyond the current limited federal tax deductions for food rescue, and continuing the great work around additional grants and incentives. And our recommendations also fall in line with one of the key recommendations coming out of the circular economy and food waste work group, with the recommendation of our state adopting and pursuing the goal to reduce food waste and loss by half no later than 2030 by implementing new technologies and making these technologies more accessible at diverse scales throughout the state of Michigan. Thank you for the opportunity to speak on today.
All right, thanks, Renee. Okay, next up.
Next is Robert Lawrason, Lawarason.
Yep, I got him. So Robert, go ahead.
Hi, Bob Lawrason, founder, CEO, Canap Partners USA. Our mission is to discover and share the successful actions and products in the Canap supply chain, resulting in improved health for land, water, plants, animals, and people. We are currently implementing a whole system design that embraces each of the work groups here, and I'm looking forward to working with each of you. Our current implementation will be supporting existing businesses throughout the state of Michigan, as well as opportunities for new businesses in handling climate change and other aspects for our future. That's it.
Thanks, Robert. Next.
Next is David Crandall.
Okay, David. Oops, I thought I had David. Hold on one second. There he is. Okay, go ahead, David.
Thank you. I want to thank you all for your hard work on this. I understand it's complicated and very easy for a casual member of the public such as myself to stand on the sidelines and offer an amateur critique. I appreciate this opportunity to express my opinion, not because I feel I understand these matters better than the experts, but because my concerns as a proud citizen of Michigan should be heard. I've read through the recommendation summaries offered on your website, and I'd like to share with you some of the ones that caught my eye. The first thing I noticed was that you have 5 work groups listed on the top of the page, but you actually present recommendations from 6 work groups. I felt sorry for the materials decarbonization work group, which for some reason didn't make the grade. I thought recommendation number 4 from the buildings and housing work group was excellent. In balancing the complementary needs of climate mitigation and jobs, Michigan should put its full weight behind the development of careers in green energy fields. And this recommendation seems to me like a solid step in the right direction. Recommendation number 2 from the Energy Production, Transmission, Distribution, and Storage Work Group is also a great idea whose time has come. Behind the meter resources will diversify our power supply, lead to more innovation, and be less susceptible to the kind of centralized disaster that occurred in Texas last year. All three recommendations from the Poor and Neglected Materials Decarbonization Work Group seem solid to me, with concrete attainable goals. Thank you for coming up with those. I saved the Energy Intensive Industries Work Group for last because it touches on one of my main climate concerns. 3 of the 5 summarized recommendations talk about forming more work groups. Surely by this time we're past the point of further studies. We have to take action. I agree wholeheartedly with recommendation number 2 about the building of industrial hubs and clusters for carbon capture. Let's get on with it. But the recommendation that really caught my eye was number 5, and I quote, "The governor should support a federal carbon pricing market." Every time this subject is raised, I hear a chorus of naysayers who say it is simply not a politically viable option. Well, all that means is that there are people in positions of power who are against it. This is not surprising. They are by definition people with vested interests. And yet the science is indisputable. A price on carbon that raises the cost of fossil fuels, coupled with a dividend of some kind, is the most effective and efficient way to achieve nearly all of the goals outlined in your recommendations.
You're welcome. 1 minute.
Thank you. Right now, carbon pricing is hanging by a thread in Washington, and because of the vagaries of the democratic process, is subject to the whims of a single senator from West Virginia. It seems likely that carbon pricing will be excluded from the reconciliation budget, but there's still something we in Michigan can do. One idea is to form a coalition with other Midwestern states similar to the one they have on the East Coast called the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative, which establishes a regional cap on carbon dioxide emissions from power plants. This is admittedly not as sweeping and therefore not as effective a solution as a nationwide carbon fee, but perhaps we can get a start on where we need to be through such incremental measures. I ask you to give this your consideration, and thanks for your time.
Okay, thank you, sir. Who is after David?
The next up is Sherry Hayden, Hayden.
Okay, I see Sherry. You can go ahead and make your comment, Sherry.
Hi, this is Sherry Hayden. I'm a civic and environmental activist. I live in Flint next to a community college. They're doing a 10-year facilities master plan, and we've urged them to consider climate issues and to build green. It would be teachable for their students and it would save them money. They could add solar, and they have characterized these ideas as impossible and crazy talk. They have no intention of taking leadership. This community college has created a heat island. One of the earlier speakers mentioned that issue with urban areas. So any plans from the state have to have a carrot and a stick. They won't do anything unless there's a financial incentive, and they must be required to comply because they use public funds. Another thing I want to add is that environmental justice needs to be more than just a slogan in the Whitmer administration. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Sherry. Who's up next?
Up next is Anthony Pachorek.
Okay, I don't see Anthony here in attendance.
Too bad.
Paul McCarthy.
Oh, I do see Paul. Okay, go ahead, Paul.
Hi, my name is Paul McCarthy, mostly representing myself. I do also represent the Climate Crisis Network.org. First of all, zero emissions by 2050 is simply not fast enough. If we want to preserve our way of agriculture, if we want to have a future for our children, we must go faster. And even at zero emissions by 2050, that means we have to reduce our emissions by to 30% of where they're at now by 2030. And I have not seen any proposals that make that kind of reduction in that time frame. So we absolutely must go faster. Another point is that we have to help the rural and low-income citizens make the transition first. They are the ones with the least resources to make this massive transformation of their lives and adapt to a new economy. One of the most common historical approaches, tax credits. Tax credits only benefit rich people. They do not help poor people. And you really need to just pivot away from tax credits entirely. They do not help the people that need the most help. I recommend a clunker buyback approach where we give people brand new zero emission devices to replace their fossil fuel burning devices, prioritizing the rural and low income people first, and at the same time, begin the process of rapidly increasing the price of carbon. That is the only way we are going to align market forces so that we actually tackle the problem in a capitalistic way. The unfunded externalities of carbon waste in our environment has to be corrected. I absolutely second the notion of joining multi-state compacts. And I think that if we join California and others and establish zero emission requirements on all vehicles sold in this state, we can really make a big change very rapidly. And then finally, in order to help the transition, I really recommend we just, incentivize business and labor by, saying that if they build a zero emission vehicle plant in this state, we will pre-order the first 200,000 of their units to give to our citizens. That's it for me. Thanks.
All right, thank you. All right, who is after Paul?
I've got Brandy Crawford Johnson.
Do not see Brandy in attendance tonight.
Barbara Carr, C-A-R-R.
No Barbara in attendance.
Doug Allen, A-L-L-A-N.
Not seeing Doug either.
Edie Juno, J-U-N-O.
Nope, no Edie.
Robert Hendren, H-E-N-D-R-E-N.
I got some Roberts here, but not Robert Pendrin.
Well, next after Robert Hendren is Robert Pawlowski.
Ah, yes, got Robert Pawlowski is here. All right, Robert, you should be unmuted, or you can unmute yourself. Go ahead.
Can everyone hear me?
Yep, hear you.
I can't hear you.
Oh, we can hear you. Sorry, I had my line muted. Can you hear me? Robert, you're muted on your end, so.
We heard you for a minute and then you dropped out. So if you just try to unmute yourself one more time, we were hearing you.
Well, maybe have to come back to Robert. Might have some audio issues. If he can't hear us, it's probably hard for us to give him instructions. So hopefully we'll get back to Robert. Who's after Robert Pawlowski?
After Robert is Shaitan Dockery.
Okay. It's SH, right? Shaitan. I don't have a Shaitan, but but I do have. Well, do we call Ellis Ball before? Because we have him now.
Yeah, we called Ellis Ball and Ellis Ball did not comment yet.
Yeah. So Ellis, I do see you there. So we'll go back to you, Ellis. I see you're there now. So you could unmute your line and make your comment.
Well, can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay. Hi, again, Ellis Ball. I was on the call yesterday and I'm just gonna say the same thing this evening that I said yesterday in hopes that there'll be a new audience hear what I have to say. I'm an attorney. I live in northern Lower Michigan. I fight fracking. I've stopped. I got an injunction from Judge Kennedy in Ingham County to stopping what would have been the biggest horizontal frack wells in the United States in terms of water usage. My interest is point of production. I was in the energy subgroup, and I just want to underline a couple of points and papers that I submitted to the energy subgroup that are no-brainers. I noticed yesterday that hardly anyone spoke about energy production, and yet that's the main problem is oil and gas being produced in Michigan. Michigan is about halfway up in the scale of states that produce oil and gas. Mostly it's gas in Michigan. And so these two recommendations I'm making are technical in nature. So put on, take notes maybe. One is that there's a statute that's been on the books of Michigan since 1939 requiring the state to foster the development of the oil and gas industry along the most favorable conditions and with a view to the ultimate recovery of the maximum production of oil and gas. Imagine that. It's a state policy to have more oil, more gas, and foster the industry. That's just the wrong thing today. May have been thought to be good in 1939 when that went into effect, but it's no good today. I know the governor can't change that on her own, and she's got to have cooperation of the legislature, but it's something that she should advocate for, and everybody on this call should advocate for. It should not be, it's an ideological position of the state to be in favor of oil and gas. No, we should be against oil and gas and not for maximizing oil and gas. So that's one point. And I have a paper. I have a paper about that pending. I believe it's still in the hopper. And the other is another technical point. There's a production, what do you call it, layer called the Entrim Shale across the northern Lower Peninsula. And in order to draw gas out of the Entrim Shale, you also have to draw carbon dioxide out. It comes out naturally with it. But what do when the gas comes out, they capture it and they sell it. But the CO2 that comes out, they just vent it freely to the atmosphere. And it's been doing this for years. The EGLE finally recognized that it was waste, but EGLE does not prohibit it. It should prohibit it. It's already on the books. It does not require a change of the law to do that. The governor just needs to tell EGLE, stop releasing CO2 to the atmosphere. The law that gives EGLE to do that, authority to do that, is MCL 324.61504. And it's just that EGLE should start enforcing a
3 minutes, sir.
statute that already has. I'll stop there. Thanks very much.
Okay, thanks for your comments. All right, we can go back to Robert Pawlowski again. Robert, I sent you a note. You might want to check the little arrow next to your microphone icon. Make sure you got the right settings there set up.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, we can hear you. Got an echo though, so I think you might have two phones on.
Okay, how about now?
Yeah, that's better.
Sorry about that. I had some connection issues. Good evening, everyone. Robert Pawlowski here, calling in from Detroit, well, south of Detroit. I'm actually doing this. I'm on behalf of myself and as well as Transportation Riders United in Detroit. I'm here regards to the invite I got from them regarding the transit work group. And I really like the plan altogether. The transportation work group and the focus onto that puts it first. My opinion altogether, I think transportation should be the first focus on this climate crisis. One reason, we barely have good transit in our state. Number two, that is the biggest thing to solving climate change. It reduces gas emissions and it gets more people involved with using transit because they know that it's helping, and it also is putting a stop to climate change in the long run. I am a big transit activist in the city of the Metro Detroit region. I've made news headlines over the past 3 weeks, and my work is well known around here. I speak for Ann Arbor Area Transit, DDOT, SMART, as well as Coast RTA in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina. And I really do focus on climate change when I do publicly speak during every board meeting, because climate change is a big thing at this point, and we're not doing anything at this point to fix it, other than these organizations that are putting forth the effort to make sure that our future generation has a life to grow up in, unlike this generation possibly being the end because of our climate crisis. And, putting our first start, raising gas prices should not be the first thing we do to end a climate crisis. The first thing we should do is to figure out how we can make transit better in our state, as well as focus on the climate crisis behind it. That is the main key altogether when solving this climate crisis.
1 minute.
Other things beside, transportation is needed. Transportation is the focus to this climate change crisis. And I really would like you and everybody here at Eagle to take in consideration that transportation is one of the biggest things we should solve regarding climate change first. That is the biggest thing that needs to be looked at first and foremost. Other than that, great job on the plan tonight. It was really well done, and I look forward to hearing more in the coming months regarding more of this climate change talk. But thank you again for the time and opportunity to speak, and have a wonderful holiday. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Robert. Kimber, where did we leave off?
We had called on Shayton Dockery, and I think that individual is not in attendance. So after that is Ted Tansley.
Yeah, so Ted is here. And Ted, you can unmute yourself and go ahead.
I think I'm muted. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, yeah, this is Ted Tansley, resident of Detroit. I'm not representing any group, though I am a member of my block club. I agree with Robert on a lot of the things he said about transportation, but I wanted to focus on the number 6 action item for the transportation plan, which is takes a safe systems approach to reduce vulnerable road user fatalities and serious injuries. I think that's great that they've included it, but that needs to be higher on the priority list. We're talking there are thousands of lives either lost or irrevocably damaged due to auto collisions in the state. Thousands of people totally have their lives changed or ended due to auto collisions. And not having it in the top 5 is basically saying that you value cars more than you value human lives. It's really frankly kind of shameful. I do think we should invest significantly in making safer and more accessible walking and biking infrastructure throughout the state. And then when you can go ahead and start looking at the numbers and you consider that more than half of all motor vehicle trips that are taken are within less than 3 miles in distance, we should be looking to subsidize the electrical vehicle adoption that is right-sized for most trips. And that would be the electrical bicycle in all its forms. And then when you also consider that there's a growing population of people unable to drive in our state, whether that's due to ability, age, or the high cost of automobile ownership, maintenance, and insurance, which is the highest in the country, choosing to subsidize electric cars with the hopes of mass adoption is incredibly inequitable. And when equity is your focus for the group, you should try to pick the options that would promote equity over the most inequitable option. And then I think that when you subsidize electric cars, that it'll only serve those who are already able to afford a personal automobile and are capable of driving one. So really should be looking elsewhere. And we need to really honestly look at prioritizing trip replacement towards other modes really quickly. That's the only way we're going to meet our climate goals. And this is something that's been proven to be possible the world over by making space for other modes and prioritizing those users' safety. We just need to make the space and prioritize other modes, and we'll hit our numbers. But we got to really realize that mass adoption of electric cars isn't going to get us there fast enough. It is a process, it is, part of the solution, but it's not the solution for our transportation emissions. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Okay, who's next up?
The last person on our list of people who indicated they want to comment in person is Jacob Ermet, E-R-M-E-T-E.
All right, I see Jacob. So Jacob, you go on mute.
Hey, my name is Jacob. I just want to say, Ted, you are awesome, and you pretty much stole like a lot of words from my mouth. So I hope I can somehow connect with you after this meeting or something. My name is Jacob Ermete. I just moved to Hamtramck from Livonia. I work as a multimedia specialist at a nonprofit in Dearborn. I'm representing myself, so excuse me if my comments seem more anecdotal. I only heard about this event yesterday, so I have not been able to read more in detail the recommendations. So there's probably things I'm saying that may or may not have been discussed before. I see a lot of great ideas and comprehensive areas so far with renewable energy, transportation plans, and land use. It's very possible what I want to recommend has been discussed within a few of the recommendations I'm going to say that I'm seeing beforehand. But I think relieving car dependency and all its peripherals can't be emphasized enough. In relation to transportation and buildings and housing, a lot of these suggestions at first glance feel like a way of grandfathering car infrastructure with transit as a peripheral. Car infrastructure, electric or not, is a huge waste of land use and has other public health risks that come from low physical activity and a lack of public spaces where people can relieve the mental health effects of isolation. And there's many more economic benefits to that too. I see in Workgroups, buildings and housing and transportation and mobility, the recommendations to increase energy efficiency in residential, commercial, and industrial buildings, and also the recommendation to establish a coordinated and comprehensive transportation electrification plan. I'd like to know if part of the energy efficiency building details is to encourage multifamily mixed-use structures that remove the need for car storage, the need to drive to get one's needs met, and centralize utilities to multi-unit dwellings instead of spreading them thin among single-family houses. I'd also like to know if the transportation and mobility work group is including equal efforts to incentivize things like 50-minute cities where residents can walk or bike to all their needs nearly within 15 minutes of where they are, which could also give way to connecting these 15-minute cities with frequent, affordable, and safe public transit, which also could possibly help alleviate the need for large freeways or freeways entirely in some areas which have historically cut through Black neighborhoods and physically gutted communities of color. I think there should be a motion in this work group to eliminate single family and single use zoning that spreads citizens apart at the scale, thank you, of motor vehicles. Can we create incentives for gentle densities such as legalizing commercial accessory units and residential accessory units in single family neighborhoods? There are many successful examples of sprawl retrofits across the country, and there are plenty of car dependent independent cities that have been in existence for centuries. It's probably a tall order, but I think the goal to nearly eliminate car dependency in urban and suburban cities is absolutely crucial to reducing carbon emissions and improving the overall public health and happiness of Michiganders. Many places exist and thrive independently of cars, and one of them sells record amounts of fudge every year. Michiganders should have the option to conveniently not own a car. Thank you very much for your work, Eagle, and thanks for hosting this forum.
Thanks, Jacob, for your comments. Kimberly, did you say that was the last of the people who had indicated they wanted to comment on the registrations?
That's right. That's the last of those who registered in advance to comment.
Okay, all right, folks. Well, at this time, what we'll do is open it up to other people who want to make a comment that haven't commented yet. And I already see a lineup of folks with their hands up, so that's good. If you do want to make a comment, make sure you raise your hand, click the raise hand icon, and we'll come down the line and call on you. If you're on the phone, and we do have some people that are calling in on just the phone, you can click the #2 button. Again, that's #2, and that'll put your hand up, and I'll see it, and I'll call your phone number. So just a reminder, same deal for all of you. Please limit your comments to 3 minutes, and I'll let you know when you have 1 minute left. And restate your name and any association that you might be representing. So with that, let's get it started. First person with their hand up here I see is Jesse Miller. So Jesse, you can go ahead.
All right, thank you, and hopefully my dog will quiet down and let me talk. So
So my name is Jesse Miller. I am from Ypsilanti, Michigan. And while I do serve on the board of directors of the Ann Arbor Area Transportation Authority, I am here representing myself. Thank you for the plan. There's really not much in the plan I disagree with. A lot of it has to do with priorities, and it's actually been stated by the previous two speakers. In particular, I'm disappointed with the prioritization of electrification and the transportation and mobility work group. While I do believe electrification is vital, I'm not seeing enough about reduction of VMT. And as pointed out by California's Air Resources Board, they found that even if every car in their state were electric, and if 75% of that electricity came from renewable sources, driving would, even in those ideal circumstances, need to decline by 15% for the state to reach its climate goals. And so I'm not seeing nearly that sort of recognition of that priority in this plan. I'd like to see more encouragement of density and the infrastructure to support density, more public transportation. And I'm all about electric buses, but we need to have buses, and people riding on buses is better than people driving around in cars, as far as our climate is concerned, and as far as our safety and societal structure is concerned. It was actually a bit disappointing to see. I know it's just a page layout, but that the building and housing work group was at the opposite end of the list from the transportation and mobility work group. I feel like those two topics are intricately intertwined, and I'm hoping that there's going to be really close cooperation between work groups, and that those work groups are also looking at the groups focused on social equity, because there's a tremendous intersection between the things that threaten the disadvantaged in our society and the things that threaten our climate, and the things that we can do to
1 minute.
Thank you. People riding on a bus is good for our climate, and it's good for the disadvantaged in our community. So I want to see some cooperation there. I'll try and get more of this written up in a much nicer fashion to send in later. Thank you for hosting this session.
Great, thanks, Jesse. Just a reminder, if you didn't see it, you can scroll up in our chat, and you'll find a link to the Climate Solutions Workgroup recommendations, as well as email addresses for all of the different work groups that you can submit comments to. Okay, next up hand is Mary Jo. Mary Jo, you should be able to unmute yourself and make your comment.
Thank you so much, Jim. So many interesting comments tonight. My personal interest in the plan is public transit. I've always used it when I could and when it made sense, but as I've grown older, it's become more of a necessity rather than an option. And I see that one of the top 5 recommendations from the Transportation and Mobility Work Group does deal with public transit. Quite a plan, quite a goal, but where there's a will, there's a way. I also agree with Kay Chase about the need for more attention to passenger train transportation. I was also drawn to the first additional recommendation about developing plans to encourage non-motorized mobility and so forth. And Ted Hansley was talking about that, and I definitely agree with his remarks on this issue. And I also agree with Robert Pulowski about making transportation and mobility a more focused issue. But on another topic, I want to mention trees. I assume this issue is addressed somewhere in the plan. I'd like to see something that would help communities who want to make stricter restrictions about removing or replanting trees possible. I think sometimes they're not allowed to by state law. And similarly, for things such as restricting use of plastic bags or other plastic packaging items. And finally, I'm wondering if there'd be a place in the recommendations for ideas that the individual resident can do to help with climate change. Maybe there could be some sort of planned education campaign to alert individuals to what they can do to help fight climate change. Thank you, and thank you for all your hard work.
Okay, thanks, Mary Jo. Okay, next up is Margaret Stritz.
Hi, it's Maggie Striz Calden.
I'm speaking on behalf of myself. I also work with two nonprofit organizations, Michigan Clean Cities and Southwest Detroit Environmental Vision. And I was a participant in the Transportation and Mobility Work Group. I want to just emphasize the importance of carbon neutrality, especially in the next 5 to 10 years for fleet transportation solutions. If we go too quickly and too strictly to zero emissions immediately, we actually limit in the near term the amount of emissions reduction we can achieve. And that sacrifices populations who are most vulnerable, and it restricts our potential success later on. So what I want to emphasize is that we do look at that carbon neutrality and a multitude of transportation fuels as a possibility, especially for fleet users, whether it's light duty fleet or medium and heavy duty fleet. And plan for, in that meantime, moving as quickly as possible in all duty cycles for fleet to low and zero emission, and use whatever levers the government can do to make that happen. Also, that the state should be making its own fleet an example of best practices. I also want to emphasize what others have said, the vehicle miles traveled reduced, especially related to individual personal vehicles, that is really critical, and others have said it better than I will. And also, I haven't heard much discussion about the state preparing as a relatively climate resilient location for climate refugees. And we have some capacity to accept additional residents. And we really need to be considering how we can be as open a state as possible and as prepared as possible to be welcoming to those who need a place to come. And so I really want to raise that up as an issue. And I want to thank everyone who has come before us. As a 40-year-old person, the love generation, the baby boomers, everybody ahead of me who has laid some groundwork to make this conversation possible today. And we really need to make sure that Governor Whitmer can stay in place so that we can see these things to fruition. As far as implementation, I really want to encourage the state to collaborate with nonprofit organizations on the ground who already have legs to stand on in making implementation for these recommendations happen faster and in many ways as effectively as possible. I grew up in Melvindale. I'm a lifelong resident of Michigan, and I really want to see this state thrive and come up with solutions that work for those who are most vulnerable and all of us in the state, including wildlife. So want to mention that too on behalf of my own personal priorities. So thanks to everybody, and let's keep working on it.
All right, thanks for your comment. Ian Tran is up next. Go ahead, Ian.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Ian Tran, and I was based in Detroit, originally from the metro region in Canton and Ann Arbor. And I guess what I'll say is that I'm representing on my own behalf, but I've also chaired advocacy for the U.S. Green Building Council in the region, and also have advised some other organizations and think tanks on energy ranging from nuclear to renewable. First, I want to start with some guiding paradigms, because I think that's one of the challenges that, from a public lens perspective, people struggle with climate change. And often also in a lot of the policy arrangements, there's sort of a binary versus quantum computing thing. And I'll explain what this means, where we think of binary in terms of flipping a coin, where it's all or nothing. We want to get to a certain target. And the way most of the climate change approaches have been so far is very institutional heavy, which it's important. You know, we need the state of Michigan to guide policy. But at the same time, as several people have mentioned, that there are a lot of things that can be done at more local scales. And that's one of the challenges that the energy industry also struggles with, at least in its current mode. Whereas when we looking at all sides of the dice, is how I would say it, where let's say we want to roll a 6, but we need to roll a 6 as many times as we can. can we count all the other ways that you can add up the numbers on other parts of the dice to equal 6? So that means adding the 1, the 2, and the 3, so that that counts as a 6 also. And by that, I think looking at some of the education paradigms that other folks, including Mary Jo and others have raised, will be really important, especially leaning into participatory community approaches to educating the public, even when it means, like if it's, for example, Citizens Climate Corps or something. In the state of Maryland, Anne Arundel County, they have a watershed stewards program where they're basically ambassadors for taking care of the Chesapeake Bay's, environmental quality. But also when we look at public hearings, can we integrate workforce development opportunities and education to that? Because often in communities, especially low-income communities in Detroit, for example, there is local expertise about the challenges. And so there's an opportunity to change that dynamic. When it comes to energy, I want to say emphasizing 2030 targets rather than 2050. Right now, like Whirlpool already is shooting for 2035 net zero, and then there were 2022 for landfill and water is 2030. And also, the state of Michigan has a treaty obligation with the Anishinaabe Nation to ensure basically the enjoyment of, let's say, their maple or hunting and fishing rights. And so pursuing a more aggressive target is kind of obligatory in a couple ways. And also we know that there's some who are taking the lead. I want to point out also narrative in SMR for nuclear energy, which is there's a fallacy or something that's omitted often in the narrative, which is that even though they may be smaller and lower profile of risk for the individual thing, perceived, but when you use more of them and put them in, across Michigan, again, this is a climate refugee area.
3 minutes.
Arable land is important. So thank you. I'll submit other comments by email.
All right, thanks, Ian. All right, Michael Schneider. Michael, if you want to go ahead, you can make your comment now.
Okay, thank you. I'm Mike Schneider. While the Michigan Healthy Climate Plan is a realistic approach to achieving carbon neutrality, we all know that the schedule itself isn't nature's bottom line. What really matters, of course, is the total amount of greenhouse gases that we put into the atmosphere. So while working to meet the governor's plan, it's important to do what can be done to minimize greenhouse gas emissions along the way. The Palisades nuclear plant is scheduled to close early next year. That doesn't need to happen. It's licensed to operate by the NRC until 2031. This was a business decision by the companies involved that could likely be reversed if our state government decides it wants to keep it open. Some may say, I don't care, we're building renewables rapidly, but look at the reality. Michigan now has more than 30 large wind farms and about 50 large-scale solar farms that have been built up over time since 2007. Together, they produced about 6 million megawatt hours of electricity in 2019. The Palisades plant has produced on average about 6.3 million megawatt hours of electric power per year, which is about the same as all existing wind and solar farms in Michigan. From a greenhouse gas emissions point of view, closing the Palisades nuclear plant 9 years early is equivalent to having the electric utilities decide to shut down all currently existing wind and solar farms in the state for the next 9 years. Although renewable energy generation in Michigan continues to expand, the carbon-free energy of the Palisades plant will be replaced primarily by natural gas. Consumers Energy said they plan to acquire another natural gas plant to replace it. In any case, new renewables should be replacing fossil fuel plants, not nuclear, until all the fossil fuel plants are gone. Mother Nature doesn't care whether our CO2-free power generation is from renewables or nuclear, or in what year we meet our emission goals.
You have 1 minute.
The severity of climate change depends only on how many tons of greenhouse gases we put into the atmosphere. Closing the Palisades plant 9 years early will put a lot more CO2 up there. The work group recommendations on energy production should include a policy of maintaining all existing nuclear plants as long as they can be maintained to be safe. I hope that you will consider this change. As I understand it, the federal government's infrastructure bill includes funding to help keep existing nuclear plants open. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, next up in line is Larry Junk. Larry, you can go ahead.
Thank you. I'm a physician in the state of Michigan, and I'm proud to stand for the health in the state of Michigan in my advocacy. I'm especially concerned about problems resulting from air pollution, which caused thousands of deaths among Michigan residents, as well as problems directly caused by climate change. I want to comment about several aspects of the proposed plan. First of all, related to energy production, I would like to see that we require our public utilities to move to sustainable energy sources starting in 2022 with stepwise goals down to 0 greenhouse gas emissions by 2035. I'd like us to require our utilities to stop spending their customers' dollars to lobby for measures that stall the transition to sustainable energy, especially limiting home solar installations. I'd like to see support for legal and administrative measures, as well as financial support for neighborhood geo-exchange wells. With these, neighbors together can install deep well systems in their neighborhoods that can reduce heating and cooling expenses by up to 2/3. Related to transportation and mobility, I'd like to see expanded access to zero emission public transit. Also incentives for private purchase of electric vehicles and to see installation of EV charging infrastructure. Regarding buildings and housing, I'd like to see a program of free energy audits for all households in Michigan, starting with low-income neighborhoods. I believe we should use federal dollars where possible to support retrofits, especially of low-income housing. Regarding our natural working lands, I'd like to see planting of trees in urban neighborhoods, especially neighborhoods of low income, as well as measures to protect the trees in urban and non-urban environments.
1 minute.
I'd like to see Michigan establish a 30 by 30 land protection target in Michigan to preserve our natural lands, including their carbon sequestration by trees. Related to climate justice, I'd like to see job training programs attracting low-income persons to help Michigan make the transition to sustainable energy, including solar and wind installations, energy audits, and home energy improvements. I want to thank those who work for Eagle, as well as the members of the commission for their good work, and thank you for the opportunity to talk this evening.
Okay, thank you. Next up is Sam Simonetta. Sam?
Hi, I'm Sam Simonetta, and here with my wife, Christine. We're residents of rural central Michigan, and just wanted to make a couple comments in regards first to residential energy consumption. I know that space heating and water heating are essentially the two greatest energy users in a home. And with that in mind, I think one of the ways that we'd like to, or what we'd like to do is try to encourage utilities to try to push for more heat pumps, whether they're air source heat pumps or ground source heat pumps and heat pump water heaters. From personal experience, I know they both work very well, and it's a way that we can significantly reduce our energy use in the home. Another item I wanted to mention quick is that recycling, while there seem to be more and more recycling centers available or out there, it seems like they're too few and far between. And I think recycling needs to be made a lot more convenient for people if we're going to take advantage of that. Finally, I agree with the comment made earlier that, or comments made earlier, that we need to make these changes more quickly. If we're gonna turn this thing around, we need to do it fast. If we can put a person on the moon in 1969, I think that we can do this sooner than 2050. But in order to do so, I know that people aren't going to do it on their own. I think it's really going to take a lot of government intervention and almost mandates for us to make these changes in time. So I think Christine has a comment too.
Good evening. My name's Christine Simonetta. I want to thank Governor Whitmer, and I'll just call this group EGO. Hopefully we can soar to a new level. And what I want to say is not only represent myself, but the other critters on the planet. We need to look at how much space can humans really take up. And this is the elephant in the room. Nobody wants to talk about population. Sam and I chose to be child-free. I think there should be much more discussion around that. We should have a lot more ideas around what's cool. It's cool to have a smaller home. It's cooler to have a smaller family. It's cooler to grow your own food. And you need to start with the kids. So there's been a lot of great input, and I thank everybody for showing up tonight. It's what it takes. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, thank you both. Marie Cooper. You can go ahead and mute your mic now. Marie?
Okay, thank you very much. I appreciate the opportunity and all the hard work that the working groups have put into researching and making these recommendations. I especially appreciated Dr. Yunke and Dr. Lisa Delbono's remarks on the extremely expensive health cost of climate change and extensive suggestions to strengthen the recommendations of the working groups. Although I volunteer extensively with the Mount Pleasant chapter of Citizens Climate Lobby and Education, I'm representing myself with the following observation based on conversations around regenerative farming practices. So I'm referring to number 2 on the Natural Working Lands and Forest Products Workgroup. Just wondering, could the increased funding mentioned in number 2 include contributions from downstream stakeholders like county commissions, municipalities, and other governmental entities, MDOT, drain commissioners, all examples of entities that benefit from improved soil health and wetland conservation. Examples of those benefits include less flooding damage to homes, businesses, and roads, and less runoff that contributes to algae blooms with its multiple problems, including affecting water supplies. So whether or not this funding would include some sort of localized green banking system or some other kind of system that facilitates the adoption of regenerative farming practices and other land practices from which downstream stakeholders benefit, not just the landowners themselves, because there are cost and risk involved in adopting some of these things. So can that risk and cost be shared by the larger body? Thank you so much. I appreciate all the work and the big turnout that shows the interest of so many Michiganders in improving our climate and health of our wonderful state. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for your comment. Kaylin Boudreau. Kaylin?
Hello. Hello, my name is Kaylin Boudreau. I am a high school student, and I'm speaking tonight on behalf of the committee of the High School Climate Change Symposium planned by students of the Battle Creek Area Math and Science Center. Before I begin, I'd like to add that I agree with a lot of points and things that everyone has spoken about tonight. As a high school student, I would like to talk a little bit more about education on climate change, as others have pointed out. Not a lot of schools teach about climate change, let alone in-depth facts and inner workings of the impacts that it has on the environment, community, and economy, even though it is the largest problem that our generation and many after us will face. The Battle Creek Area Math and Science Center teachers worked in collaboration with professors from the University of Michigan and Michigan State in order to create a curriculum for climate change class option at our school last year. The curriculum was super successful, and almost every student from the center signed up to take it within the first year of its launch. Our teachers from the center have been working hard to try to share the curriculum with other teachers from around the area, and I believe that this should be required to be a part of high school classrooms around the state, country, and maybe even the world. As part of the curriculum, I've learned about the different pieces of information, including carbon tax and et cetera, that were all talked about today as part of these policies. We even read IPCC reports about climate change and even wrote papers to those of political power. In order to create change, you have to help others understand the reason why it's essential. And that is why I believe that we desperately need to encourage climate action and education in schools. Policies can be put into place when voters and people support and back them. That's why I believe that debunking climate misunderstandings and educating everyone around us is essential. If these policies are to be put into place, students and adults are going to need to understand why and how these impact the worldwide climate and environmental problems. I'm really appreciative and grateful for the work that everyone within the work groups and these communities and committees working to create climate action and change in policy are doing and have done. Thank you for your time.
Great, thanks, Kaylin. Appreciate your comments tonight. Next up is Margaret Anisco.
Hi, this is Margaret Nisco from Grand Rapids, Michigan. And I just wanted to share that I did agree with a lot of points as well, particularly with going about and subsidizing more electric options for even people that may be disadvantaged as well, making it affordable. So in my city, we actually have a bike and scooter share pilot program, which started in September 30, 2020. So it's covering about a 12-mile area, and we have electric bicycles and scooters. So it's kind of just improving mobility, environmentally friendly electric options, like creating a safe space. And the pilot service area actually covers 74% of our neighborhoods of focus, which is more impoverished or areas that might be that we have to focus more on. So the user fee is for there's actually a discount for some of these citizens that are meeting certain income requirements, so they do 50% off for those. And there's also something they've been doing, like an anonymous vehicle program. So it's an initiative it's called May Mobility. And they have cars that there's an app where you can get free rides within a certain area. And it's very electric, green, friendly. And they're still working on the pilot for that, but it's actually pretty good, and it helps a lot of people get around. And they got vouchers for people that are in our assistance programs. So that's one step towards making this more safer and more inclusive societal structure, so everyone can get around, and then we can get to building things like, safer water without the lead in the pipes and everything like that. And of course, focusing on our climate. Thank you so much, everybody.
All right, thank you, Margaret. All right, seeing one more hand up here. Diane Corpolongo.
Hi, thanks for having the open mic at the end. I had a chance while others were commenting to finally go back and see what the notes were in terms of the building technologies group. And just as a note, I'm from Metro Detroit. I live in the city of Belleville. I do appreciate that heat pumps are a part and electrification is a part of the plan. But I do strongly want to say that we are past the time for pilots on heat pumps. We really need to act now and get as many heat pumps into homes as possible. Furnaces are replaced roughly every 6 seconds in this country. And a furnace lasts 20 years. It's a 20-year decision. So if we don't impact all of our residential customers now, we're going to be very, very behind the times. So I just like to make my closing statement being that, like others have said, we need to act faster. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Diana. Okay, we got a couple more hands up here. Kathy Weinman.
There we go. Thank you for calling on me. This idea that I would like to share was shared with me by a very special person who has done a lot of things through her tenures with public schools. And the idea is that large school systems, for example, the Ann Arbor Public School System, would be required to hire a sustainability specialist at the cabinet level. Someone working in that position may take a look at the fact that a very large public school system, or it could be any other large public organization, perhaps with 100 or more employees, generates a tremendous amount of greenhouse gas. And a sustainability specialist at the cabinet level may actually be able to do something to fund, to use newly released federal funds and line up projects so that the schools or the other organizations could reduce the emissions both by running their buildings, their buses, the number of people that bring themselves to work or school. So it's not a completely formed idea as I'm putting it to you, sharing it to you, but I just wanted to pass that along. Thank you very much.
Okay, thanks, Kathy. Is there anybody else that has not made a comment yet that would like to make a comment tonight? Okay, I do see one more hand up. Robert, I know you had already made a comment earlier. If you want to just wrap it up, make a quick comment, you can.
Me again, calling in from Southgate in Wayne County, south of Detroit. Just like to comment on Kaylee's comment, the fellow sorry, the connection's going in and out. The fellow Battle Creek student that is really pushing for climate change to be taught in schools. I agree with you 100%, and I think that should be done. And I think that more needs to be done, especially when it comes to certain situations like this. There's not a lot of talk with climate change in schools, and that's the biggest issue. And, that's why half these students don't know, the differences between climate change. And that's a big roadblock right there. That's why we have not, done anything in the right mind to fix it, because no one is teaching it in high school.
Okay, I think we lost Robert. So, if anybody has more comments tonight, I know you must have cut out. So what I'm going to do is we've got a couple more people here who have already made comments. I want to, I guess, check in with James to see what our time check is for tonight, and what your thoughts are on any more comments.
Yeah, if people want to take one more minute, they've heard something, they want to react to it, but let's limit it to 1 minute on the second time around.
All right, thanks. Yeah, so a couple more people have their hands up who've already made comments. Robert, looks like you're back. So if you would, Robert, just unmute your line, go ahead, and if you can wrap it up within a minute, please.
I do apologize. The connection is not the greatest, but I'm going to make this super quick. And I'm going to end it with this. We need climate change in schools. We need to teach our fellow new generation how, what going into the next generation. We need to teach them about climate change. We need to get them involved with the situation. It's a hot topic and really needs to be done. And the first thing, like I said, transit needs to be put first. I'm also a high school student myself in my hometown of Southgate. So I do a lot of activism. And, you know, like I said, I'm well known around this region for a bunch of activism I do in the Metro Detroit region for transit. And I push climate change first out of anything with my activism. And that's what I like to see. If we push climate change in schools and we teach these kids about what's going on, then our world is saved. Well, it's not really saved, but still, in the long run, it's making a difference. And then, you know, finding solutions like transit and other things that solve it will help us in our world and help our new generation as well. So I appreciate the comment, Kaylee, and I do apologize for the connection issues, but you know, we keep up the fight, and that's what we need to do. So keep up the fight, and thank you again for the time and opportunity to speak.
All right, Robert, thank you. Ian, you wanted to make another comment? You got about a minute, so go ahead.
Thanks. I was going to add, for construction, will the state have, this is kind of a question, but construction needs new financing devices to stop, or at least stopgap funds or incentives for bridging the initial costs of green building practices, because normally it's either the client or the developer or the general contractor that, you know, they'll struggle even if they're interested. And then also, is the state willing to develop anything to address that? Another part is incentivizing replacements for turf grass. So on residential scales or whatever else, you know, school grounds, and, you know, to locally appropriate native plants, especially ones that may be good at fixating, you know, carbon and other emissions. And then another part is whether the state can modulate more towards, you know, energy efficiency or energy optimization for community block scale investments too. Also, I noticed that there's a lot of focus on carbon, but again, methane, even freon, actually, those are actually very, very significant. So I want to encourage Eagle to not lose track of the rest of the greenhouse gas emissions and their impacts. Also, again, I will echo the education piece as well, as far as not just for K through 12, but just public education and engagement, because again, there's very few like visceral ways for people to really interpret it unless they've actually gone through some environmental you know, context. And so even for, you know, senior citizens or people coming to these public meetings, we need some way to build a pathway, or for, you know, whether it's workforce development or just basic literacy. And again, I kind of referred to like a sort of a climate stewards program or something of the sort, maybe a potential pathway. And then when it comes,
thanks, Ian. I'm sorry, I got to cut you off because I got to keep moving to the rest of the people. We got a few more people lined up, but I really appreciate your comments. Feel free to add more in the email. Written comments are solid too. So thank you. I need to go on next one. Mary Jo Durvraj, you want to wrap it up with
Yeah, I wanted to comment, you're talking about education in the schools. Years ago, I thought of this when I saw Catherine Savoy's name on the list. She wasn't able to comment, but years ago, she did a talk at our local historical museum because she was one of the first 50 people to work with Al Gore and to explain the movie and so forth. Anyway, someone said, should we show this movie to kids in grade school? And she said, well, I think it'd be pretty scary. We need to teach our kids to love the earth. You know, I don't know exactly how you do that, but, you know, the teachers get them to love the earth and how important it is. And hopefully that'll keep them going to want to know how we keep the world it is. Thank you.
Hey, thanks, Mary Jo. And last comment, Paul McCarthy, you want to come back up and
yeah, sure. Thanks for letting me back on. Just reinforcing one of the previous comments. It's, you know, any brand new device that's being sold in the state of Michigan today that burns fossil fuels is an environmental disaster. We need to just disincentivize the sale, you know, the production, sale, ownership of brand new fossil fuel burning devices. The state has a dozen different levers they can push to disincentivize that kind of behavior. And also to reinforce, the many comments on car dependent zoning, car dependent landscape. There's no need for it. It's unhealthy and it undermines all of our needs. That's it for me. Thanks.
Okay, thanks, Paul. All right, James, I am going to, that's our comments for tonight, and we've had quite a few. So I'll let you, make your final comments there if you want to.
Yeah, thank you. Just really appreciate everyone who took time to participate this evening in providing comments to us. We have a couple of more meetings of the Council on Climate Solutions yet this month, and we plan to report back to them what we heard tonight. But again, feel free to continue to submit written comments, and the website up on the screen right now, or the ones in the chat if you want to be a little bit more specific. The Eagle will then be preparing the draft My Healthy Climate Plan. Expect to see that in mid-January. And then once again, we'll have another round of public comment on the draft plan itself. So again, thank you very much. Really appreciate you kind of joining us tonight, and look forward to hearing from you and working with you in the future.
All right, thanks, James. Just want to remind everybody that we did record tonight's meeting, and we will be posting it up on the Eagles YouTube channel in the next couple of days. So if you go under YouTube and look under Eagle, Michigan Department of Environment, Great Lakes and Energy, you should be able to find this recording as along with all of our other public meetings are up there. So thank you all for taking time out tonight to make thoughtful comments and for listening, and have a great rest of your evening. Thank you.